Have you ever seen such organized mic stands? Like, they just attach to what we're singing. And it's like, I mean, I would say my specialism is recording acoustic instruments, just in general, like kind of across the board, like folky acoustic instruments, and kind of like production that builds on and around that. I mean, you just record strings in the space like you do in any space, like plonk some mics overhead. Like plonk a mic over the top of the It's very technical. I mean, I make it sound like it's super easy. I don't think it is. Like I'm thinking about so many things when I'm placing a microphone, but I guess fundamentally that is it. You're gonna place a microphone to capture the sound in front of or on top of the thing. And in strings, for violin, it's like you look at where the F holes are on the instrument and you're gonna plonk. I think it sounds good, like a foot to 2 feet above. But you gotta have enough clearance for the bass. Mic covered. My friends in here are the 414s. Me and the 414s are like besties. Because they sound so good on acoustic instruments, and I can basically guarantee, especially when it's like a fast-paced session, I don't want to be faffing around with like experimenting too much. Like, so cute. I mean, I'm going on about folk. I do other things as well. This is also one of my besties. Neumann 47 FET. And this is great on anything that's got a more bassy range on it. I should try it on like the bass end of an accordion, really. I don't know why I've never thought of that until this exact moment. I would use it on like things like a cello or a kick drum or like any kind of anything that's got a bass response. You can maybe use it on a viola. I've got a bass violin, which is like basically rogue and shouldn't really exist. It's like a violin with strings that are an octave below. So this is good for that. But sometimes microphones can miss really crucial frequencies, and especially in like records that are like basically entirely acoustic, the bass frequencies are like super important that you catch them, because most instruments aren't going to be in that range. Like if you're recording an accordion, a fiddle, like some percussion, vocals, what else might we put in? Shruti box, harmonium, hurdy-gurdy, flute, what else? I don't know, all kinds of things. But all of those exist in the same range. So then if you've got the one guy that's playing the acoustic bass, you've got to get all of that, really, because otherwise you're going to be in problems later when it comes to mix and the track doesn't feel grounded enough. I'm also a massive bass hoe. Like, I love bass. I want there to be bass everywhere, so I've got all kinds of like tricks that I use digitally in post to like get more out of it and to ground tracks. Like 2 different ones that I use that basically artificially add sub-range in post to things that maybe have an amount. Like you could add it to a guitar really subtly, and then suddenly if you've got a track that doesn't have much bass, and you can't just add it in an acoustic record. It's not like if you're making an alt pop record, which is the other thing that I have like focused time on. I'm talking a lot about folk at the moment because that's like what I'm mainly working on at the moment, but like, yeah, it's not like in an alt pop record where you might be like, okay, well, we've recorded like the guitars and got some really interesting sounds, and now we've added like some weird like pads or whatever, and it's like, oh well, we're missing some frequencies, so we'll just add it in on another MIDI instrument and we'll just blend it in. And it does matter because it contributes to vibe, but it doesn't matter that you didn't record that live. Like if it's a totally live record, you can't just add stuff in afterwards, because A, it will sound bizarre, and B, it's not what the artist wants. Like if they've done it live and they've got their players, and that's what they've got. So finding tricks to add extra frequencies in a way that is like sympathetic to those performances but makes the record sound full is like something that I find, in a very nerdy way, quite exciting. Because you're like playing within the limitation of like how far can I push the boundaries of the production of this record that still needs to sound acoustic? But in my mind, I want it to sound kind of larger than life or kind of enhanced in some way. Okay, this is the U87, which is another of my besties. I'd use this a lot on vocals. She's so pretty. Yeah, I don't really know what to say about this. Like, the 414, the 47, the 87 are probably the things that I use the most by far across the board. Use that on vocals, you could use it on piano. It's got like a slight, I feel like a slight edginess to the sound. It's not as smooth as the 414 or the 47. Like the 414 is so smooth, and like if you want more bass out of something, if you recorded it with a 414, it's got this really silky bottom end. That has an ever so slight harshness in, like, I would say around 3 to 4K. So great for vocals because you're going to hear like every detail. Haven't experimented with it much on acoustic instruments because every time I've thrown it on that, I'm like, but I prefer the 414. Just sounds really sparkly and pretty. There's I just think that like Neumann microphones in general just sound awesome on vocals. It's just got just exactly the right amount of like detail and slight crunch, in my opinion. There's like a vintage 47 at another studio that I'm at a lot, and it sounds super cool, and like it's also like so cooked and so saturated, so it's like very particular. I think vintage microphones are cool because it's like they tell their own story in the sound, and everyone's different. And like most people would never hear the difference, but that's like what engineering is. It's being able to hear the like subtle differences between different things, right? So that you can like build layer upon layer of tiny changes that contribute to like something amazing. This is a bestie. Such a standard microphone, everyone has it, but it's so good for if you've got like, if you're recording like guitar or mandola or mandolin or banjo, any of those like fretted instruments where the instrument's here and the voice is here. The problem is if you put a condenser microphone here to catch the detail of the instrument, then that's also going to catch the voice. So you've got like a choice. You can either do one microphone and capture both at the same time, in which case that's kind of cool because you're completely locked in at mix. You can't change that. Like you just have to engineer it really well. Or what I would do is probably place the microphone more on the instrument and then stick that on because it rejects so much else. So then I can just turn that up to compensate for whatever wasn't captured by my main condenser mic. And they're not going to have a phase issue in like quite the same way as you might if you did like the standard. There's like a standard condenser microphone technique where you like will use 2 condensers in a figure of 8 and then use the null points. So you're going to have one there and one there. But I've basically always found that there's phase issues. I don't know. Maybe when I've done it like 100 times, I'll figure out the like exact magic of doing that correctly. But like, yeah, I just feel like in a rush, this is really reliable. That's my favourite EQ, basically of all time. I'd use it in analog. I also have a digital emulation of it. It's just like, it's got that like quite pokey like API sound on it, which is cool. So it adds like that like slight edge to it, but also because it's surgical, it's like we're just gonna remove or add, normally remove in like my world. There might be like 1 or 2 frequencies, maybe like bands that I just want to like knock a couple of decibels off. Usually like it's really good for me at getting the like 1K, 2K, 4K, like just knocking that back ever so slightly if someone's got quite like a an edge to their voice in that way. Or maybe I've used like the 87, which kind of can like amplify that, then I might knock it back ever so slightly in reaction. And then also for adding in some like really top end fizz, it's good for that. What else do we have here that I like? This guy is a friend. the manly, the stressor is a friend. Sort me out. And then this desk just sounds literally amazing. It's like, frankly, you don't even need to gang up that many things at all because the desk just does all the heavy lifting. It just sounds great. Like most of the time, if I'm tracking in here, I use Logic, so I'm gonna load that up. I'm gonna track directly through the desk into that, and then I might put like, I don't know, like a couple of 1176s like digitally and like a Valhalla digitally to like set up the session, and it just sounds like a record immediately. Like it's done. You know, like if I spend time with one individual thing and I know how to use it, and like I know like the sound that I like to get from that particular thing and how to dial it in, then I can just be super speedy and like creating, I guess, what you would describe as like, you know, every engineer has their sound. So that's like my sound. Like the first record I ever made was with a band called Goblin Band, who are a folk band, and like I was at one of their gigs. I think we went to the pub afterwards, or maybe it was in a pub or something, and I was like a bit drunk, and then one of the band members was like, oh, we need somewhere to record, and I was like, I got a studio, because like Goldsmith Studios, at the time I was a student, now I work there, but at the time when I was a student I was like, I've got access, I'm really into music production at this stage, but I didn't know like a huge amount about engineering, but I was like, how can it be? In my drunk mind, I woke up the next morning and was like, okay. Like in my experience so far, I need to be someone that's like well organized and good at talking to people and good at like sort of like multitasking multiple projects at the same time with different timelines and different budgets and different people and like 1,000,001 email threads and like meeting deadlines and all of that stuff that goes on behind the scenes that people don't necessarily realize is like such a huge part of the job, is like the behind the scenes admin, along with then switching on like creative brain in like super intense like maybe 8-hour days, and you just have to get it done. Like it's actually a very high pressure job, and like bands and artists don't have like, you know, they usually don't have like enormous budgets where like they can't afford for you to mess up. This is the thing. So like they will have saved up from doing their gigs or like whatever, or like saving up from, I don't know, like whatever it is, and then they've trusted you with their work. That's pressure. And like you just like, for me, I'm just like, I just want to get it right for them. Like I just want it to feel good. You need to be really, really savvy about where you're going to like find the next job, because every job is like small and you're reliant on like lots of different projects happening like all at the same time in order to sustain yourself. Like I am both incredibly blessed, but also have worked incredibly hard to get to a position where I can like rent this studio and I can make this work. Like the whole thing is full of challenges, and I don't see any of those challenges necessarily easing off in the future. So that maybe the future challenge is just like sustaining that in a way that's healthy and like respectful of like my mind and my body and my like well-being, because it's hard to be respectful of those things when you've got so much going on all at the same time. So I guess that's like what I'm currently figuring out, is like, how do I look after everyone that is coming into my space and trusting me with their work, but also look after myself and make sure that I am in a good place. That means that I can then be in a really good place for those people. It's like 50% psychology and just looking after people and making them feel like a rock star, or making them feel like they're on like a sad, lonely island, or making them feel like, I don't know, like the world's coming to an end, or making them feel like it's like the happiest day of their lives. I don't know, like whatever they're feeling, you like will amplify that to get like the thing out of the recording, but also to make them feel like safe in whatever it is that they're expressing. And then it's like 50%. Well, I've got to leave some percentage, right, because we've only got 100 to play with. It's 40% problem solving and understanding the intricacies of a space and like how to plug things in, and like what does that strange sound mean, and what does that strange sound mean, and like if like a cable goes funny, it's like, well, what cable is it and where, and like maintaining looking like smiley and happy whilst also like panicking on the inside, like how do I solve this, like whatever it is that's going wrong. And then it's like I guess there's a chunk on top of that that's like specialism and skill and like experience. What do you play? And I'm like, violin. They're like, oh, classical. And I'm like, nah. Folk and pop and rock. And they're like, oh, interesting. What else do you do? And I'm like, I do faders. And they're like, what else? And I'm like, nothing, that's it. Like, what more do you want from me? Come on. Yeah. This piano is amazing because it's got sympathetic strings, meaning that it like resonates so much more than your average piano, and it sounds like normal in a way when you play it in a room, but there's something about when you mic it up, you can hear like all the whistling and it just sounds like its own magical. It sounds almost like it's just got a reverb built into it, which I guess it does in a way. It's like, it kind of sounds normal. You can kind of hear it. It sounds like there's like wind in the piano. And like when that's mic'd, it just sounds like amazing. It just fills like all of the space. And this track was like specifically kind of supposed to be lower, but we ended up putting loads of higher stuff in it just because it sounds like a forest or something. Sometimes you get moments that are like totally magical in the studio, and there's just something about the way that like the vibe and the performance and like the gear and like the things that you've dialed in comes together to create something super magical that is captured. And I don't know how that's captured because like, you know, maybe that one take amongst loads is like just somehow magical for some reason, but there's no like, you can't quantify why that is, it just is. But like, I find engineering to be like the whole range of emotions. It's like everything from like super meditative all the way through to super angry. Like, and I'm probably going through all of those emotions through the day. Like, it's quite an intense, I guess like I'm talking specifically about recording sessions. It's quite an intense environment for like everyone to be in. Like, it's a forever game to not doubt yourself. I think most people doubt themselves all the time over all sorts of things, like career or otherwise. Like, I don't know, I don't really believe in fucking up. Basically, I just don't think there's such a thing. I mean, clearly there is, you know, but I think if you're creative, you can work your way around these things. Doubt, I don't know, I've been doing music for so long. I was a violinist before I was an engineer, and you get trained in how to deal with criticism, or I did anyway, and like how to basically be able to take people like telling you that you're bad at it or like whatever. I don't know, like I just had all of this training about how to like deal with being on stage. When I was studying at uni, like I started teaching one-to-one production and also violin, because basically like that is quite well paid and it's flexible and I'm in charge of it, and I kind of knew somehow that like if I could make that work so that I could pay rent and buy food using that money, it would mean that when I graduated from my degree I could then do something like this that is like a little bit more risky, basically. So I suppose that's not really talking about doubt, but it is sort of like future-proofing myself a little bit so that like I could do something like this.